fuck is that?
Kenobi, when it was first properly announced, I thought was doomed to fail. Idiot producer Kathleen Kennedy spoke about a rematch of the century, and that was just a major red flag. As I've probably discussed 1,000 times over, Disney doesn't care about continuity at all. If they can break continuity for a quick buck, they will. Why am I always this pessimistic? Because the other shit Disney made utterly failed to impress me. The Mandalorian was bleh, the sequels were terrible, and the bait of Bobby Fett was a shitty mess. So they started announcing and hyping up this show, and they tried to alleviate people like me by getting the 2 prequel OGs back, Ewan McGregor and Hayden Christensen, plus 2 supporting actors like Joel Edgerton and Bonnie Hunt. Now, I totally believe the 2 key actors when they say that it's great to be back, doing another Star Wars show with each other. I truly do. I know the actors aren't allowed to speak their minds until the contract is done. I do see that some actors may be too excited to question iffy creative decisions. I heard Harrison Ford is way too prideful of Indiana Jones to speak up against the inevitable dumpster fire. When you're an actor, you're forced to put faith in what the director tells you to do and what they end up making. After all, it'll all come together in the editing room. Or not. Something that the actors usually don't get to go through. Ewan McGregor and Hayden Christensen returning is not enough to inspire hope in me. They've played that card with the sequels, and since they failed, I'm going to be way more cautious this time. And of course, the rematch of the century line was just pushing me away. Why'd you have to say that? You know that continuity hawks like me are going to be cautious when you say shit like that. Given prequel fans are ones for proper continuity, we point out when Disney both contradicts the previous material and contradict themselves. Even though it's high budget and official, everything Disney makes will always be fan fiction. I don't look down on something for being fan fiction. I look down on it for being bad. If Kenobi is not a good fanfiction and it destroys and shatters continuity, I'm going to call it out. None of this happened in George Lucas's story. Let's get that straight. But it's not like a Kenobi show couldn't fit with his story. It's just that Disney are too arrogant to think they can do anything wrong with the story. They keep churning out crap, and any passion projects don't make it out unscathed. People just accept the sequels because it's official. It's not authentic, and it sure as shit isn't George's story, and it never will be. But people can't get that through to themselves. The same is true of Kenobi. But just because it isn't authentic won't automatically make it bad. Now, one last thing I wanted to talk about before I begin is that Ewan McGregor, either prompted by Disney or prompted by himself to get prequel haters to watch, said that the Kenobi show won't have the awful CGI from the prequels, and that bullshit narrative. The irony being that Kenobi is far from a practical show. I know that they don't have the budget to shoot things on location, and it's easier to do the Unreal background engine thing they did for The Mandalorian, but come on! I know that Ewan McGregor is just trying to get prequel haters to watch the show, but that doesn't excuse the lying. Funny enough, at Star Wars Celebration, they flat out admitted the prequels were very, very practical in a lot of instances. Funny how they didn't do that while they were promoting The Force Awakens. How shallow can you be, guys? Anyways, enough with that. Let's talk about the one, the only, Obi-Wan Kenobi and his show. So the show starts with a 4-minute recap, summarizing the entire prequels and specifically Obi-Wan's arc. It feels exactly like fan service, and I almost imagine they did this to cushion the blow that the show is going to do to continuity. Believe me, judging this by just the premiere and none of the other episodes, and we've got problems. Anyways, let's just forget that the recap exists. I only know they did it to get you hyped. So let's see what the actual show is like. Well, they start with something I didn't see any point to. The Order 66 sequence. We already saw this in the recap, and I don't care if it's setting up Reva's third sister arc. Obi-Wan explains later in the episodes that Inquisitors are former Jedi. Of course, this lines up with the leaks about, well, we'll get to that. Yeah, I read the leaks. Why? So I don't get any shitty surprises. This stuff doesn't add anything new to Order 66. I guess it is nice having more Order 66 footage for any meme makers, and it was certainly better than Grogu's flashback. I guess the repeating execute Order 66 was a nice touch, but it's only a touch. A faint touch. Anyways, the actual story starts not with Obi-Wan, but with the Inquisitors landing on Tatooine. We all see that dreaded Grand Inquisitor redesign for live action. My buddy Iron Inquisitor made a video expressing how they butchered his design, and it looks like crappy cosplay. And on top of that, the actor who plays the Grand Inquisitor in this show, who should have just been Jason Isaacs, said how he didn't watch Rebels because he quote-unquote wanted to give a unique performance.
Brave, but foolish, my old Jedi friend.
So yeah, the Grand Inquisitor's design sucks. He was poorly adapted to live action. Why is it so hard for them to get something right? We, the audience, immediately notice the problems. How could this have passed? Anyways, accompanied by the fifth brother, who does nothing except be a shitty sidekick, and the third sister, Reva, played by one Moses Ingram, whose character I don't like. Yeah, Disney knew the character wouldn't be good, hence why they tried cushioning it by saying there would be racist fans. Well, I'm here to spin that classic cheap shot on its head. I think the Empire is way too diverse in this show. And I don't mean that in a racist way. You see, in the original trilogy, the Galactic Empire was made up of white men, and you can bet your asses that was intentional, because the Empire is supposed to be fascist and oppressive, and the command structure would reflect a rigid hierarchy. You look at the Rebel Alliance, and there's black people, women, and alien races. But with Disney shit in general, they seem to have missed that. By making the Empire more diverse, it just takes me out of the story, because I subconsciously realize that it's out of place. Yeah, sure, the Empire has a few diverse people, like Grand Admiral Thrawn, but that's an exception rather than the rule, and the Thrawn trilogy points that out. So yeah, it's not comparable. I don't know what you're trying to demonstrate by having a black woman be the secondary antagonist anyways, because it doesn't fit at all. And I'm not criticizing it because I'm racist and I think black people are the N-word. It's actually the opposite. So anyways, the Inquisitors show up and they march across the town and everyone stares at them as they walk into a bar and confront the owner. The Grand Inquisitor does a monologue about the Jedi and it's a very big exposition dump. It seems like a very clunky way of setting up the story because the Grand Inquisitor is basically setting up why they are here. I mean, I'm sure there are a lot of people who didn't watch Rebels who are watching this, but it's still an exposition dump. I mean, they tried to build tension as the Jedi is about to be uncovered. They didn't do a good job, alright? Believe me. I would love to be lenient, but it's just so questionable. The Grand Inquisitor, I think, should have been way more imposing than this, but then again, it's hard to take him seriously with that crappy cosplay made in China. So the third sister throws a knife at the owner, and the Jedi in question stops the knife in its tracks and runs off. And I guess this is done to establish the reckless nature of the third sister. As the Jedi gets away, and it's her fault, the Grand Inquisitor speaks to her, and it's revealed that she has an obsession with capturing Kenobi to gain favor with Vader. Gee, that almost rhymed. This is the start of why I don't like Reva. She comes across as some snarky bitch. The Grand Inquisitor tells her that he will not warn her again. Stop thinking about Kenobi. Keep that in mind for later. Also, I have no idea why the Grand Inquisitor puts up with this bitch. Like, seriously, where's the discipline? The Vader comics, I hear, did this way better with the Inquisitors, but anyways, we finally get introduced to Obi-Wan, as he's working with a bunch of other guys to siphon meat from a dead whale or something. I don't know why a whale would be in the fucking desert, but whatever. I'm also going to assume that this whale died very recently, because if it was there for a few days, it would have dried up. Our first introduction with Kenobi is him watching another guy get pushed around by the employer when he isn't given what he's promised, and Kenobi, because he's in hiding, doesn't do anything. I was half expecting Kenobi to give the guy his payment, but I suppose the series has better things to show, allegedly. Kenobi then goes back to the town, gives his animals some food and then rides it back to his place. I don't know if his house hasn't been built yet, but what the fuck is this? Kenobi didn't live in a cave, I don't think. Some Jawas show up to sell Kenobi some stuff. This scene doesn't do much, except establish how Obi-Wan can tell that Jawas are stealing from him, and are also buying something that he will try to give to Luke. Next, we've got a dream sequence in him waking up and trying to speak to Qui-Gon, but there's no response. I found this opening sequence for Kenobi really dull, because it just feels like boxes being ticked. Also, I read the Marvel Star Wars comic issues that details Kenobi's life on Tatooine years after Revenge of the Sith and would canonically take place before the Kenobi show. They seem to have copied a lot of stuff from the comics and at the same time contradict them. Like, Kenobi's hut, for one, is nowhere to be seen. Instead, he lives in a cave and we see him use a lightsaber when the show has the lightsabers buried away. I mean, there's nothing overtly broken continuity-wise, but this comic and the Kenobi show has very iffy continuity, continuing the trend of Disney disregarding their own continuity when they want to tell a different story. Funny enough, the comic also had Obi-Wan and Black Chrysanthemum fight, proving once again in regards to my bait of Bobby Fat review that they were just cherry-picking stuff from the comics. But the series contradicting the comics are the least of the problems this show has in regards to continuity. Obi-Wan gets up and goes over to the Lars homestead to watch Luke. Nothing wrong here, before bringing the toy he bought for Luke out by the door of the Lars homestead. While riding back, that Jedi from earlier tries talking to Obi-Wan. He pleads him for help, and Obi-Wan at first deflects him and tells him he's got the wrong guy. Since this guy won't piss off, Obi-Wan tells him to bury his lightsaber somewhere and live a normal life. To describe this sequence, I don't actually have a lot of complaints. Obi-Wan is doing the smart thing and what he should be doing in between Revenge of the Sith and A New Hope, but later the scene will become absolutely meaningless. We later cut to bright white scenery as a girl is being dressed. As I pretty much thought the first time, we're on Alderaan for some reason. Breha Organa, Leia's adopted mother, shows up, and when she realizes one of her friends is posing as Leia, we cut to Leia out in the woods and exploring and shit. Given they're structuring the show like this, you can tell right off the bat that Leia will play a pivotal role in the show, and I'm like, what? Where are they going with this? Also, I thought Leia in the show was a little young. The actress would have been around 8 years old when this was filmed. I checked. And I suppose the child actress who played Leia isn't terrible, I suppose. She's this rebellious, adventure-hungry girl, and I didn't find her overly annoying, at least at first, which was surprising. Given what happens in the show, I do suspect Leia is supposed to be the kid appeal character, just like Grogu or Omega, but it's way more naturally woven in than either of those two, and it was interesting showing the roots of Leia before A New Hope. To be honest, Leia in this show might be one of the better kid appeal characters Disney has ever written. So anyways, back to Kenobi's daily routine. He siphons some meat, goes back to town, which, by the way, the Kenobi comics also had Kenobi decide not to go back into town, so why he's going into town makes no sense, but regardless, Owen shows up and throws the bag back at him. And this scene is where Obi-Wan and Owen argue. As expected, Owen holds a grudge against Obi-Wan, saying that Anakin is dead because of him. A very similar scene happened in the comics, and it's structured in the exact same way, except it happens at Kenobi's house, not in the town. Owen and Obi-Wan argue back and forth, and I suppose it's character consistency to have Owen resent Kenobi, and he has the same attitude he had towards Luke in A New Hope, trying to seclude him from the galaxy and whatnot, and being generally discouraging, all with the intention of keeping him safe. Not a bad exchange between the two characters. It's ripped straight from the comics, so it's probably not original, but still. So then the Inquisitors show up and start questioning everyone. The fifth brother and the third sister, and we see even more that the third sister just sucks. She announces that hands go off first, and after a woman talks back and, I can't believe I'm saying this, Reva cuts off her hand. Gee, a severed limb. I was waiting so fucking long for Disney to stop being such pussies and embrace lightsabers, and they finally did it. Shame it's not at all impactful like all the other scenes in the other movies showcasing this shit. Anyways, Reva, after picking out Owen, decides to hold him hostage, demanding that the Jedi be given up or he dies, before the fifth brother tells her to stop, and it leads to another chat about the third sister being impulsive and shit. Yeah, I can tell. With that being said, they leave, and Obi-Wan thanks Owen, and Owen just says, I didn't do it for you. And then we cut back to Alderaan, where Leia and her family are at a party or something. We don't have much context. And Leia's cousin starts talking shit about how she's not a real Organa. Yeah, they're very, very close to doing a "you're adopted" joke. Wow. This is something I don't like. They're making it no secret that Leia is adopted, and I think at this point Leia knows that for some reason. Based on the conversation she and Luke has in Return of the Jedi, I think this is very iffy continuity. This causes her adopted parents to talk to Leia and try to get her to apologize to her cousin, and it leads to Leia running out of the woods, unfazed. There's a bunch of kidnappers who show up. You know, something else I started to question is, where are the guards? Why is no one stopping her from getting out of the woods? It's utter nonsense. Especially when these guys who look like they belong in Breaking Bad try kidnapping her. And she's captured. It's around here that everyone realizes this is the catalyst for Obi-Wan's adventure. And to be honest, it's probably the best one they could have cooked up, maybe. So basically, Kenobi's still chilling on Tatooine, gets a message from Bail and his wife, asking him to go get Leia from the kidnappers. Of course, we can visually tell that Obi-Wan doesn't want to. And speaking of, Ewan McGregor's portrayal as Ben Kenobi is one of the few great things about this show. Ewan McGregor, I feel, is still the same old Kenobi we know from the prequel trilogy, with the difference being that there's nothing with George Lucas written on it, but still, I wouldn't be surprised if there's a lot of quotable lines from Obi-Wan in this show in the following years. Kenobi goes into town and witnesses the Jedi from earlier being strung up for all the town to see. He's been caught and his life taken. This really isn't as sad as it could have been, and this Jedi, to be honest, has mostly felt like an excuse to have the Inquisitors on Tatooine to set shit up. So I kinda suspect the Jedi was nothing more than a plot device to get the story going. Also, it probably would have been a more impactful sight if he was hung by the neck instead of having his body strung up. It's the little details that make all the difference. But point being, Kenobi returns to his cave only to meet Bail Organa, who tries to ask him again to help save Leia. Obi-Wan of course refuses, telling Bail his responsibility is to the boy. But Bail still tries to get him to save Leia. He begs and pleads, and after a little while, Kenobi decides to break continuity and go get Leia. They're not actually going to have the two interact, because that will be a whole embarrassing continuity mess in of itself. Obi-Wan previously was so rigid in doing his duty that I don't believe that he would so easily stop watching Luke. It would take more than a come on from Bail to convince Obi-Wan to go on this potentially dangerous mission and expose his identity to the Empire. Plus, Leia refers to Obi-Wan as if she has not met him in A New Hope. Continuity broken. So with that being said, Obi-Wan decides he will go and get Leia, going to the spot where he buried the lightsabers, which again, the comics already showed that he still had it on him, but anyways, he gets his lightsaber, and since Bail told him that she was headed for Daiyu, he gets a ticket off-world, and that's the end of the first episode. Gee, we're only up to the start of part 2 and they've broken so much shit. Very inspiring, isn't it? So with that being said, can the next episode do better? Not really. The start of episode 2 isn't actually half bad. Obi-Wan poses as a dude looking for his daughter in the system, and he's told that there's no way he'll find her. And huge credit where it's due, the incredible Clone Trooper cameo, played by Tamara Morrison, which certainly made up for the bait of Bobby Fett. Seriously, Tamara Morrison's surprising cameo was very surprising, unlike The Mandalorian Season 2, and it was symbolically important, reflective of clone troopers being disposed of after Revenge of the Sith. With little dialogue said, the clone trooper asks Obi-Wan to help get a veteran a warm meal, and Obi-Wan gives him some money. I wonder what it was like for Ewan and Tem to work on screen together again since Revenge of the Sith for this one cameo. The only issue I see with this part is the age of the clone trooper, who would canonically be 46 if he was a first batch clone trooper. But then I realized, oh wait, it's probably accelerated aging. You got me there, Disney. Plus, it was more effective seeing an old, out-of-shape clone begging on the streets anyways. Appearances can make for good presentation, along with good writing. This cameo may be the highlight of the show, ironically. Yeah, because the show begins to decline again relatively quickly. Obi-Wan asks a young woman how to find his daughter, and she just gives him some drugs for free. Which it is kind of hard to believe because nobody in the real world gives away drugs for free, even if it is the first hit. Then a kid walks up and says there's a Jedi on the planet that helps people, and I gotta say, the next scene after that is actually pretty good, but after that I promise it goes downhill. We're introduced to this guy who I originally assumed was more ethnic diversity, who ended up being a decent supporting character. That being Haja Estri, a rip-off artist who took cues from me and decided to pose as a Jedi, rip people off and get paid for it. We see this guy rip off a woman and her son by pretending to do Jedi powers in a mind trick, and then telling the both of them they can go to a certain gate. Obi-Wan comes in and sees the facade, and as expected pulls off his magnets. Despite being scum, the scam artist has some amusing dialogue. Even though it's just a supporting role, the actor really got into his character. This might be one of the best supporting characters in a Disney Star Wars story ever, funny enough. Obi-Wan holds a blaster to him, and as well as that, demands that he help him or he gets a blaster to the back. Nice to see Obi-Wan isn't a pushover. So the scam artist tells him to go to a certain place, and Obi-Wan disguises himself as a worker, and we get our first taste of the choreography when two guards confront him. Looking at the choreography, the fighting feels too planned out. Looking at the fight in greater detail, it's like the actor had cues to fulfill, like block, punch, kick, block, uppercut, twist, if that makes sense. There's a pause as if it feels like someone off screen is giving instructions for different moves. Sounds about right. At least it looks like an actual attack, rather than the sloppy and retarded choreography of The Last Jedi. Still, this fight feels like there's a lot of cues being given. So with that being said, Obi-Wan gets into a trap when he thinks he's found Leia, but it's just a decoy and he's restrained by the thugs. After a bit of cliche-sounding banter we usually hear when a character captures another and is smug about it, Obi-Wan throws the drug he got from earlier in the ground and knocks the guys out. From there he finds Leia and escorts her out. Now, Leia in this episode is a hindering nuisance. She can't shut her mouth when she would obviously need to, and keeps asking Obi-Wan to do shit he couldn't do. But worse yet, it's a damn continuity issue. Leia speaks of Obi-Wan in A New Hope as if she's never met him, and no, the Ben excuse isn't gonna cut it, because I don't see how Leia wouldn't put two and two together at that point. And that's all you need to see, that continuity is being discarded. What this show does is ignore what's said or even implied that was obviously the case and change it for their narrative. I hate this. It's not even attempting to cover up the plot hole. They're just ignoring continuity. So with that being said, Kenobi tries to sneak Leia around, and Leia just doesn't keep her mouth shut. Afterwards, we cut to a scene of the Grand Inquisitor getting angry at Reva for obvious reasons. Kidnapping an Imperial Senator's daughter. Like she's allowed to do that without repercussions. So what punishment does Reva get for being careless?
Absolutely nothing!
Yeah, that line from episode 1 where the Grand Inquisitor warns Reva not to fixate on Kenobi results in essentially nothing. What a pushover. And for some reason, after the Grand Inquisitor orders for Kenobi to be found, he just walks away from Reva, who has gotten no penalty. And with that, he's essentially a pushover and a dumbass. And so Reva, facing no imprisonment, immediately puts a bounty on Kenobi. We see that aliens like Crocodile Dundee arm themselves in search of Kenobi, and with that, Kenobi brings Leia along, who is getting annoying, and also proclaims his Jedi identity in front of a huge crowd, and eventually, Leia sees the wanted holo photo and concludes that Obi-Wan is lying and in fact the real kidnapper. Obi-Wan doesn't explain that the wanted hologram is because the city is looking for him, because he's a Jedi, and Leia runs off. So Obi-Wan has to chase Leia to the top of a building, where Crocodile Dundee and some other aliens are shooting at him. Meanwhile, the third sister is tracking their position with the gunfire. So Leia jumps off like a dumbass and almost falls to her death. And oh, that's why they had Leia run off. It's so they could have a scene where Obi-Wan needs to tap into the Force again. Obi-Wan struggles to use the Force, and I really didn't feel the tension it was trying to convey. Maybe it was because I was taken out of the story, and I saw a scene like this coming from a mile away. But Obi-Wan manages to save Leia, goes down, and she believes him when he says he's a Jedi at last. So anyways, looking for a way off-world, the scam artist shows up and offers him help. Go to an automated transport that's your passage off-world. So Obi-Wan, with no other choice, decides to go there, as it's his only hope of escaping the planet. And then the third sister comes across the scam artist, who planned to distract her, and very easily force probes him. Yeah, Kylo Ren was a pussy, wasn't he? And she lets him live for some reason. Anyhow, Obi-Wan and Leia are close to escaping, and they talk a bit about stuff that they shouldn't be talking about, like Leia's real mother, which is bending so much continuity at this point, it's not even funny. Reva shows up and demonstrates how she's the worst antagonist ever. All she does is taunt Obi-Wan and be a strong female antagonist. I just hate it. And what do you know? They break even more continuity by having Reva taunt Obi-Wan, who is hiding from her, and she reveals that Lord Vader will want him and that Anakin is still alive. No joke. She legit knows that Vader is Anakin Skywalker. How? Very few were privy to Darth Vader's former secret identity. I don't imagine that the worst of the Inquisitors will be privy to that secret. And yeah, I'll talk about episode 5 when we get to it. Plus, I don't understand how Obi-Wan would not know Anakin was still alive. Wouldn't he have heard of the exploits of the brutal Darth Vader by now and realized that his apprentice was still alive out there? This doesn't make any sense. This was all done for dramatic effect and it doesn't make any fucking sense. Also, the Grand Inquisitor shows up, and after some arguing that gives Obi-Wan the time to escape, I wish I was kidding here, but the third sister straight up stabs the Grand Inquisitor. Well, that's a definite pushover right there. Of course, immediately, it gave the impression that he died. Obviously, he can't be dead. Unless they're retconning Rebels, which I wouldn't actually be surprised if they did. But regardless, it's such a shitty part of the show. Again, we'll talk about this in episode 5. It makes the third sister come across as even more pretentious and unlikable as a villain. So with the Grand Inquisitor potentially murdered, Kenobi and Leia escape. And as we get close to the dreaded you-know-what, Obi-Wan says Anakin's name, and we cut to fucking Darth Vader in the bacta tank. Oh no. This is going to be a code red emergency. Let's move on to the next episode. So the next episode starts with Obi-Wan meditating and getting his daily dose of PTSD. That is just archived audio and means absolutely nothing. Seriously, they are not subtle with the referencing. And of course, we cut to Vader gearing up and it's not half bad actually. But then the story falls apart again when the characters just open their mouths. And of course, we're on Vader's castle on Mustafar. Too bad they don't use Mustafar for anything beyond that. That seems like an important place, doesn't it? Well, forget about it besides this one scene. At least the castle is accurate to Vader Immortal in Rogue One, so they didn't half-ass it there. But anyway, we get to Vader sitting on his throne and talking to the third sister. Ugh, do I hate this scene so much. Aside from Vader being fixated on Kenobi, I just hate how Vader offers the third sister the position of Grand Inquisitor. And yeah, I know what happens in episode 5, but that was dumb as fuck and I'll explain when we get to it. Then we cut back to Kenobi fixing Lola, which by the way is such a stupid name for a droid. They land in a Southwest American state, probably Utah or Indiana or some shit like that, because that's what it looks like, and they sneak past the droid shipping crates and stuff. Not complaining here, it's one of the few smart decisions made in this entire show, but it's not going to save this horrific show. So Kenobi walking through the desert discusses a bit of the mining planet's backstory in some unremarkable, forgettable dialogue, and then he sees a vision of a dude in Jedi robes. Going back after finishing the show, I had no idea it was Hayden Christensen. I suppose it's a blink and you miss it sort of thing, so I'm not going to complain about it too much. Then we cut to a scene in the Fortress Inquisitorius, which again is accurate to Fallen Order at least. We see the third sister tell the other Inquisitors that Kenobi's on one of the mining systems, and demands probes to be sent out. And the other Inquisitors are basically talking shit to her, with the fifth brother holding her out by the Force. Good to know that the secondary antagonist is a fucking weakling. I hate Reva. She's not an antagonist or even a good character. Reva is designed to be the in-between character between Obi-Wan and Vader, and it just doesn't fucking work because he's crammed in, and there's no history between Reva and either of the two. She wasn't in the prequel trilogy, and she just fucking rips you out of the story, because it's a fucking distraction. This show should be about Obi-Wan and Vader. Also, they try to make her seem like she's a lot more smart than even Vader. She put 2 and 2 together and somehow correctly guessed that kidnapping Leia would draw Obi-Wan out. Why? Because Bail served with Obi-Wan in the Clone Wars? Yeah, I'm pretty sure Obi-Wan served with a lot of people in the Clone Wars. It was extremely dumb luck that she happened to pick out the one accomplice that Obi-Wan was still in contact with. Anyways, they go to the spot where the scammer told them to, and nobody shows up. Instead, we've got a transport driver, and Leia signals for the both of them to be picked up. So we meet this mole-looking motherfucker named Freck, who is played by Chicken Little Shit himself, Zach Braff. Anyways, this taxi dude, whatever the fuck he's supposed to be, offers them both a ride. And even though Obi-Wan told Leia not to talk, she just fucking does that anyways. Why does she never listen? So anyways, Chicken Little Shit agrees to drive them and they hitch a ride. Anyways, he also brings stormtroopers around for the ride. And something I have to say about Frack is, as a hideous alien, why the fuck does he support the Empire? Isn't the Empire xenophobic? It's not like he's putting a facade of fake support given what happens later, but it just doesn't sit right with me, especially since he's just a fucking transport driver. Anyhow, the stormtroopers get on, and they're surprised they don't recognize Obi-Wan, given his face was plastered everywhere in a nearby system presumably. I don't fucking care if they went to explain it off by saying only Vader and the Inquisitors know about Kenobi, because that's bullshit. I think stormtroopers would be on the look as well. In a bizarre case of stupidity, Kenobi accidentally refers to Leia by her real name and forgot the cover name, which was Luma. This is so stupid. Also, it's partly Leia's fault too, because she was just a fucking chatterbox, and the stormtroopers just fucking buy it. Fucking hell. What kind of writing is that? A scene like this could have worked with a more intelligent and intense dialogue, with Obi-Wan deflecting questions, but come on. I don't know what I expected from the buffoons who didn't even know Obi-Wan should have heard that Darth Vader was alive by now. Anyways, the stormtroopers leave, and Leia and Kenobi really push continuity, with Kenobi alluding to Leia's actual mother. And then Chicken Little Shit brings the transport to a checkpoint, and talks about the two hitchhikers being very suspicious. So the stormtroopers decide to inspect the pair, and a fucking probe droid identifies him there and then. And then Obi-Wan attacks the stormtroopers, beating and shooting the shit out of them. And I suppose there's a small positive with the guy at the top tower getting shot and falling into the laser and getting split in half. Of course, Obi-Wan quick shots the stormtrooper, holding Leia as a hostage, and then instead of walking around the laser, Obi-Wan just wastes time and shoots it to get through. I guess it doesn't matter that much, because an Imperial squad shows up, which is just meant to introduce this woman, never gonna tell a lie, who turns out to be one of the good guys, good gals, because diversity, who brings them to a small town. And of course, we get the scene of the Inquisitors tracking the two, and the trio sneak past Imperials and they go to Tala's hideout, and meet the droid they snuck past at the start of the episode. We are then introduced to a scratch board or something, of Jedi that Tala's faction named The Way helped escape the Empire, and Obi-Wan noticed that Quinlan Lebowski was there. Oh, how I'm going to tear the Clone Wars Season 3 to shreds. And some stormtroopers show up, and the droid just stares at him, and they assume he can't understand and just leave, while he's holding a hammer. Probably stole it from Bob the Builder. Now he can't fix it. And then they talk about how they're compromised, even though the two stormtroopers fucked off immediately and go through some tunnels or whatever. Also to point out, this show has a terrible sense of time. Given in the next shot, it's fucking nighttime, even though this scene is supposed to take place immediately after. So Vader shows up, and to be fair, his presence is actually kinda good. I will give some credit there, and I love how he chokes some bystanders for no reason whatsoever. He tells Talalai and Leia to go on without him. And so, the dreaded rematch of the century begins, when Vader comes into direct contact with Obi-Wan. Fuck you! you automatically lose 50 points, Disney. I was hoping that it would just be a narrow, almost met moment, but no. They interact. Let's get something straight. Whatever they're trying to prop up was not the rematch of the century. This was. So at first, Obi-Wan runs off at a slower pace than you'd expect, as if that's going to outrun Vader. So then they finally have their clash, and well, it isn't the best, but I'd say it's okay. And also the third sister, meanwhile, somehow finds the entrance to the tunnel system and pursues Leia through it. So after some clashing, Vader starts a fire and then throws Obi-Wan in it to burn. The fire burns everything except his face, and he was consumed by the flames for a long enough time to have his fucking face burned off. But since they need to abide by the kid-friendly rating set up for their own show, they don't. You know, when they did this, I was half expecting Obi-Wan to receive facial reconstruction in the next episode, and then he'd start looking more like Alec Guinness. But no, that would have been too clever for this dumpster fire. Gee, if they were to break continuity that much, then at least you could make it fucking badass with the coolest ideas imaginable. Blow us away for fuck's sake. And then Tala saves Obi-Wan, and for some reason Vader just watches, not bothering to walk or jump around the fire. Or even better, fucking use the Force to push the fires to the side for him to walk on. Where's the fucking urgency? Where's the tension? Stop standing there like a fucking idiot and finish him off. And also Reva captures Leia. Thus the crappy cliffhanger, leading to the mostly filler episode 4. We pick up from the last episode, in which Obi-Wan is dragged to a Bacta tank to get his wounds healed. The episode makes it seem he was in there for like 10 minutes at most, because again, the show is terrible with time. The episode even points out that he needs to heal longer, and Obi-Wan is just like, nah, what I've got is enough. And so we cut to the Fortress Inquisitorius, which at this point sounds like an overly fancy name, but anyways, we've got Leia being interrogated by the third sister, who tries to pry information out of her. This crap is mostly filler because it goes nowhere. Also, maybe it would have been nice if they tried to parallel the rescue in A New Hope, because this episode has nothing to it. And then we meet the son of Ice Cube, I'm not fucking kidding, who demands Obi-Wan leaves, and then Obi-Wan pleads for him to help, but son of Ice Cube rejects the plead for help. At least until we get some prodding and this dude opens up on his backstory. This character establishment scene is the most rough and forced thing ever. I've noticed that there's no proper recurring characters. It's almost like a role-playing game, where the player is bound to meet new characters wherever the fuck they go. Again, this is where I say that a Disney Plus show would have been better as a video game. Again. And since the guy changes his mind immediately after, I guess Obi-Wan put all his points into charisma and persuasion, and it must have cost a lot of skill points, because the son of Ice Cube helps him immediately. In a video game like New Vegas, you'd have to be at like at least 90 to 100 speech points for it to go that well. This is just such lazy writing. So anyways, they do a map room exposition scene, talking about what they're going to do, blah blah blah, and it's not very interesting. They also emphasize how quickly they need to act, but only for Talalai to walk away. I know that seems like nitpicking, but trust me, it happens a lot. During a trip to the system, Talalai speaks some useless shit to Obi-Wan, and fuck off! Another pointless interrogation scene. This time, Reva puts down a piece of wood with the Jedi symbol, and all Leia says is a question asking how Obi-Wan died because Reva made that up. And again, Reva makes shit up, and Leia dances around the question. Gee, way to make the third sister look like a useless cunt. And now Talalai and Kenobi land in the fortress. I also remember a mention that the fortress is heavily guarded from the outside for some reason. So they land, and Talalai goes through the docking port and tries to get in, but the identification guy stops her from getting inside. And we have the overdone Star Wars cliche at this point, where the hero tells the guard that they'll inform a higher-up if they don't let them through. A trope that has been done, and been done better elsewhere. And again, this feels like a video game. I also noticed the symbolism of I'm a strong woman, and I can boss you around all you like, because you're a dirty, toxic white man. Because that's exactly what it feels like, with Talalai talking down to this bloke. You know what this really does? It makes the female characters completely unlikable. It should go without saying that I don't think the female characters should be submissive all the time. It really depends on the context and the story. But people are going to think that I'm a racist misogynist anyways. And if that's the case, well, I didn't know Bastila Shan had a penis.
So, let me ask you a question. Would you like to see my dick?
Sure, would you like to see mine?
Uh-oh!
Thanks for giving me nightmares. Then we have them ripping off Fallen Order and having Obi-Wan swim underneath the fortress. Since this takes place after Fallen Order, you'd think the Empire would have put in additional security measures, but I don't know what I expected from Mickey Mouse. Eventually, Obi-Wan breaches the fortress, and then we cut back to Reva and Leia, in a scene that mirrors Rey and Kylo Ren. Fuck the Reylo shippers, but point being that they replicate the terrible scene and nothing comes out of it. And the only point of this scene is for her to install a thing on Lola, and then we get to Talalai as she guides Obi-Wan. And even though there are other Imperials around, nobody hears her for the longest time, as Obi-Wan sneaks around, and we also get another scene where a man asks Talalai for identification, and of course this leads to just a damn ambush, as Talalai overpowers the guy. Yeah, right. Let's get something straight to Disney. Women are naturally weaker than men. There's no struggle between this guy that would obviously happen. Wouldn't it be more tense if Talalai actually struggled with this guy? It would add more to the short sequence. But since Disney is a company with an agenda, it's always women that overpower men all the fucking time. In their attempts to hate on men, Disney's writers are just full of fucking misandry. If Star Wars is supposedly for everyone, they're doing a terrible job at it. Because now I just feel like I should feel small for being a 19-year-old male. And my hatred of Disney ever increases because of that. They're not even flipping the target demographic, they're just lessening it. They seem to think that George Lucas' Star Wars is for fucking misogynists only. No women allowed. And since they have that delusional belief, all they've really done is push away a large portion of the fan base. I've noticed that a lot of SJWs weren't even into Star Wars in the first place, until films like The Last Jedi came out. Anyways, Obi-Wan hides from two stormtroopers, and in a very rare case of clever writing, Obi-Wan uses the Force to make a sound elsewhere to lure the stormtroopers away. You know, something that just occurred to me is why the fuck Obi-Wan didn't just take the stormtroopers' armor when he made it into the fortress. And so we get another fucking scene where the third sister finally decides to do something she probably should have done at the start. Physical torture. And I suppose the child's acting is better here. Like, Leia actually pleading got some hint of emotion out of me. Anyway, Obi-Wan goes into this weird room where he sees the frozen corpses of Jedi who were killed during the Purge, I presume. I was kind of hoping that Quinlan Lebowski would be here, but instead we've got a bunch of nameless Jedi. One of which I think is supposed to be that Jedi from the Clone Wars episode Lightsaber Lost, but he was a fucking guest character, so who cares? So eventually we get an intercut sequence of Obi-Wan rescuing and escaping with Leia, as well as Reva being distracted by Talalai, who is then restrained by two stormtroopers, and she just fucking overpowers the two male stormtroopers. What the actual fuck? And of course we get some crappy action scene with Obi-Wan setting off alarms, and as well as that, cracks the window open, which, you know, why the fuck have they not got better windows by now? Why are they so easily breakable? Anyways, after this, Obi-Wan actually puts on a disguise and walks with Leia hidden in his coat, in front of hundreds of stormtroopers he would have surely passed. Idiots. And then they're fucking cornered, before one of the two fighter ships show up to wreak havoc. One of them picks the trio up, while the other shoots at the third sister, who is somehow able to deflect the shots. They were also flying into the hangar at full speed, and of course, since one of the pilots is an idiot, he dies around 30 seconds after first meeting him, and they dare to try and make us give a shit. Who wrote this? And then Darth Vader fucking shows up and chokes the third sister, and because Vader's a fucking pussy, he lets her live when she says she has a tracker on the ship. Back on the main escape ship, they act like the other pilot's death was worth the shit, and it's not. And with that, they end the episode with Obi-Wan and Leia holding hands, and they pan over to Lola with red eyes, being the visual indicator of the tracking device. 4 episodes in and I'm still not interested. So we move on to episode 5, and we see this shot that gets the look and aesthetic of Coruscant wrong. And we see Hayden Christensen and Ewan McGregor in a flashback from the Attack of the Clones time period. And I gotta say, despite Hayden aging a lot better than the other people, where the fuck is the de-aging? This is supposed to be Hayden during Attack of the Clones. So it's very off-putting that we've got Hayden, who was 39 or 40 when this was made. Despite that, the scene is fine. I mean, you can tell George Lucas didn't write it, and the two don't feel like they have the same dynamic as Attack of the Clones, because they argued a lot, but I guess in context, they aren't in as a stressful a situation as the film itself. So this scene actually manages to be good fan service. The only question is, why the fuck didn't we get more of this in the whole show? A de-aged Hayden would have been great, with Ewan McGregor as we get shit that expands on the prequel trilogy. Not exactly scenes that cater to those who didn't even like the prequels to begin with, because Hayden is greatly underused in this show, and this is the first effective time they actually use him, in episode 5 out of 6 episodes. I've noticed in these Disney Plus shows that it feels like they save the potentially good stuff for the very end. So anyways, we cut to Vader, who summons the third sister and gives her a Grand Inquisitor pin. Oh, fuck off, show. It's also extremely stupid that a pin is the thing that is used to promote the third sister. Watching the show, it feels like a teacher giving a primary school kid a sticker in class. So Kenobi and the others return to Jabeam, and we meet the scam artist who is here for some reason. They don't really explain how, aside from the character being a fugitive. Which, I mean, the third sister let him go in episode 2, so that doesn't make any fucking sense. Unless he did something else that is unexplored, but hey, maybe it'll be explored in a comic that will be essential reading material to understand this show. So the path is getting ready to leave, and throughout the episode, there's a lot of non-intense walking, which takes away from the sense of urgency, and Lola for some reason was left unsupervised. And I'm surprised nobody notices her red eyes. That's pretty stupid. As such, the Imperial Star Destroyer shows up, and then we've got another flashback, which again is a good highlight of this terrible episode. And I also noticed that Anakin is very aggressive in his fighting style. They actually got something right in the choreography finally. Back to present time, Kenobi gives a generic speech and tells the son of Ice Cube that he's only got 1 hour, and again, there's a lack of urgency in how people move. And then an Imperial Legion shows up outside the doors, and as such, a transport lands after all the stormtroopers are in position. And I was bummed out again to see that they're giving the third sister more fucking screen time instead of the villain we really give a shit about. The third sister takes me out of the story every time. If I had to guess, I'd think that the original Kenobi script had one main difference, that being that the third sister wasn't in it. And then the idiot producer Kathleen Kennedy told them to sprinkle some SJW woke nonsense into it. And then the power goes down because of Lola, and the son of Ice Cube mentions how he can't fit in the vents to fix it. And then Leia says she'll do it, and Obi-Wan backs her up for some reason. The most we get of Obi-Wan's reasoning is, I trust her, which I don't buy at all, given she almost compromised him countless times, so fuck off show. And she got kidnapped 2 episodes ago, and he wouldn't let her leave his side, so I don't buy it one bit. And then Obi-Wan looks at a message from Bail Organa that tells him that his silence is bothersome, and if he doesn't come back soon, he will assist Owen Lars in protecting Luke. I honestly half forgot about Bail and Luke, because they contribute nothing to the show. I mean, Bail was the quest giver, and that's about it. And Luke was there, I suppose. But they both really don't do much of value. And then Obi-Wan talks to Talalai, who discusses her motivations for turning on the Empire, which involves something about rounding up civilians, which I don't care about at all. And this reveal didn't really do much for the story aside from useless backstory. So during the siege, Obi-Wan decides to have a chat with the third sister on the other side of the door that the Imperials are trying to breach. It leads to even more expositional bullshit backstory for Reva. This is where the Reva knowing Anakin was Vader plot hole is finally patched up. But at this point I'm like, it's too fucking late, assholes. Like, I knew the opening scene of episode 1 was going to elaborate on Reva, but this? Seriously? I don't care if this explains the plot hole. This is the same problem as The Mandalorian episode 1 had, where they didn't explain shit until 2 fucking episodes later. But here, it's even worse, because the plot hole took even longer to be resolved here. And then Obi-Wan tries talking Reva into betraying the Empire and Vader, because all it takes is, Vader killed your friends. Now he's gonna kill my friends. Will you let him do that? This is the most shallow turnaround I've ever seen. Okay, maybe Kylo Ren was worse, but this also is terrible. So, as the path is retreating from the stormtroopers, we get the key crappy death of the episode. Talalai and her droid get destroyed, and it's done in slow motion. But all it really does is show us her pricelessly awful expression, rather than make me cry from the drama. My face was fucking blank the whole time. I felt more pity for the subway guys in the movie Joker. You know, the ones that Arthur killed in self-defense and were established as shitty people to begin. I guess on the upside, her death is a distraction, and the stormtroopers, at least for this moment, as soon as they see the detonator, actually back off. And then we've got another flashback. You know, the one thing I will say is that it's like going through some shit, and then you get ice cream every now and then with the flashbacks. Then we've got a crappy exchange between Son of Ice Cube and Kenobi, where they try to hammer the point across that Talalai's dead, and none of it is earned. As Obi-Wan decides to surrender to the Imperials, and Obi-Wan and Reva talk back and forth, and again, he easily convinces Reva to turn on Vader, and it all feels like a fucking video game, because Obi-Wan has maxed out speech skills. So the third sister orders Kenobi taken elsewhere, and oh my god, thank fuck another flashback. I thought I was gonna lose my sanity there. And so Obi-Wan takes out the stormtroopers so easily, which is baffling, since they should have put on force restraining cuffs on him, but whatever. And Leia, who's still fixing the wires, finds Lola in the vents and takes the restraining bolt off her? Guys, do you even know what a restraining bolt is? Do you even fucking know what restrain means? It means prevent someone or something from doing something, and keeping it under control. It does not mean reprogram. Fucking idiots. So then Vader finally shows up like a fucking buffoon, and the special effects here are awful. And the Vader rips apart the ship until a second ship flies off, which is so fucking dumb. But is soon overshadowed when Reva shows up and attacks him. Of course, Vader sees it coming, which is one of the few times he isn't a fucking buffoon, and deflects her attacks, toying with her, and then fucking stabs her. And I had a fucking orgasm the moment she was stabbed. It was extremely satisfying. And of course, they fix all the bad shit that happened in episode 2 when the real Grand Inquisitor shows up and takes the pin off her. Just a quick question. The Grand Inquisitor was stabbed like 3 to 4 days ago. How did he make a full recovery in this time? And who the fuck found him after he was left for dead? And of course they ruined the two characters by just leaving her there, instead of fucking finishing her off. So unfortunately, we're not fucking done with her yet. But when it seemed like she was going to die, it was extremely satisfying. And of course the episode ends with Reva clinging onto life, going to a hologram and finding out about Luke Skywalker. And then cutting to Luke Skywalker on Tatooine, fast asleep in bed. Oh no, the leaks were true. The next and final episode starts with Reva going to Tatooine, and they don't even bother trying to explain how she recovered. Like, she was literally stranded clinging onto life, and she's looking for Luke. Cut to Vader's Star Destroyer shooting the transport carrying Obi-Wan, Leia, and the rest of the path. The sense of urgency is mitigated because the most we get is a fucking rumble, which gives the impression that they're not really in that much. During the pursuit, Obi-Wan decides to divert attention away. He and Leia have some attempted heartfelt goodbye, and it doesn't work. The thing is, the final episode might have actually worked if the build-up wasn't so fucking weak. Of course, Kenobi trusts the scam artists to deliver Leia safely to Alderaan. It feels like they were trying to give the impression that this supporting character had an arc coming full circle, but he's a fucking static character, so the scene doesn't work, on top of Obi-Wan being a moron who trusts this guy to bring Leia back. In fact, in general, the path are never seen again. They're just abruptly taken out of the show. What happened? It's like a magic pixie dust spell removed them from the existence of the Star Wars universe. Meanwhile, the Imperials are fucking idiots too, because then they try to tell us, the audience, that they can only go after one target at a time, when Kenobi tries to cause a distraction, even though that would obviously not be the case. So just forget about the path. It would be nice to have a conclusion in this particular story, but we can never have nice things. We don't see the scam artist or son of Ice Cube ever again after this point. So until it's stated otherwise, my headcanon is that the scam artist blew up after eating a potato shortly after returning Leia, and that the son of Ice Cube melted after colliding with a star a few hours later. Anyways, we cut back to Tatooine, and we see Owen and Luke doing shit. I suppose the episode does show the rebellious nature of Luke briefly, but then we get a witness from earlier tell Owen about Reva. Not really any complaints here. Maybe the witness recognized the third sister. So Kenobi does his speech to the crew before leaving. The speech is not actually half bad. Problem is, I don't give a shit because the previous episodes were terrible. And that's really the main problem. This episode relies on prior episodes for the payoff, but the build-up fucking sucked. A lot of people say the final 2 episodes redeemed the entire show, and I have to question your sanity. Because did you guys forget about the prior episodes, one of which was a filler episode in a 6-episode miniseries? Again, people lowering their standards seems to be a recurring thing with Disney Star Wars. So Obi-Wan flees in a ship to a nearby planet, which it's weird how the planet has a breathable atmosphere. This is really strange because usually solar systems only have one planet at best that can harbor life or be safe or whatever. Are you trying to tell me they reached another system in the short period of time? Yeah, right. This is a sign of rushed writing. They really pushed me away with the still bad writing, but anyway, Vader and Obi-Wan land on the unnamed planet to face each other. They finally confront each other, and this was the teased rematch of the century. So what's the payoff for it all? Well, the choreography is better. It doesn't look quite like the prequel trilogy, and I see hints of the sequel trilogy fighting in there, but I suppose it's just a hint. The music was actually pretty cool, which is surprising given I didn't notice a single part of the score, aside from the main and credits theme until now. Still, it looked a little too structured, and that the characters paused too much to give the impression that they were truly trying to harm each other. Eventually, it leads up to Darth Vader destroying the ground and trying to bury Obi-Wan in it. Which I mean, Obi-Wan's obviously not going to be killed by this. They try to have some high ground symbolism, and it doesn't really work because this is so stupid. Vader buries Obi-Wan in the debris, and it goes to show how stupid Vader is, because it's going to take more than this to kill Obi-Wan. Also, burying Obi-Wan is far from what Vader would seek for revenge, I'm pretty sure. So I was left dumbfounded when this happened again. I had a blank expression the whole way through watching the series. Meanwhile, we've got the Lars family preparing for a confrontation with Reva, who wants to murder Luke. You know, speaking of this, why did Bail Organa reveal all the vital information in a hologram in the last episode if this information was supposed to be kept in utmost secrecy? That doesn't make any sense. It was also done so that Reva, of all characters, would find out. Lazy writing. So this entire part was all done just for Reva to find out about Luke. Anyways, the Lars homestead organizes for Reva's arrival. The preparation here, I don't have a lot of complaints about. They're taking all the necessary precautions to protect Luke, except for maybe the fact that they don't flee to some other location. They even reference doing that in the episode, but doesn't happen for some reason. I do get the impression that Owen and Beru are truly trying to protect Luke, so that's a positive, and it leads to Luke himself fleeing the homestead as Reva chases him. Back to Obi-Wan. He gets all the voices in his head, and it motivates him with the strength to escape. I don't really buy this because Obi-Wan only learned to tap into the Force again a couple of days ago. I'm just saying, because I don't believe he would stand a chance against Darth Vader. Anyhow, Obi-Wan gets out of the pit and fights Vader again. And here, the choreography is actually an improvement, but it also gives me the impression that they wanted to save the good stuff for last, which is pretty pathetic when you think about it. Because shouldn't the whole show be the good stuff? Anyways, cut back to Reva chasing Luke, and this scene just shows us that she's still chasing Luke and little more. It's one of those kinds of cutaways. Anyways, we have Obi-Wan get the better of Vader and manage to damage his suit, but they could never escape the 9+ rating, but still, they did make it as brutal as you could under those circumstances, with Obi-Wan cutting off Vader's life support and cutting open his helmet. And I guess in the highlight of this entire shit show, we see Hayden Christensen underneath everything, as well as his distorted voice in between him and James Earl Jones as Vader. We hear Obi-Wan tell Anakin he's sorry, and Vader tells him that Anakin is gone. Vader is what remains. I can see that the actors are putting all the chips here, and I suppose this is the proof that this was a passion project for Ewan and Hayden. But still, it wasn't for everyone who worked on this show. This scene where Vader tells Obi-Wan he didn't kill Anakin, he, as Vader killed Anakin, would speak 1,000 bullets to the groin if the build-up wasn't so fucking terrible. But it does work attached from the other fucking episodes. I'm here trying to be as fair as I can to this show, and I just still don't feel the emotional weight this show is trying to convey. All I can say is, do better than this shit. And to rehash Revenge of the Sith, Obi-Wan just leaves, and all of this recontextualizes A New Hope, and that makes me very unhappy. Cause now it was 9 years instead of 19. If there was an in-between, it makes the sense of time much weaker. Speaking of, Obi-Wan senses that Luke is in trouble and travels back to Tatooine because his negligence caught up with him. Even though this shit should be taking place at the same time, Obi-Wan makes it to Tatooine instantly, which let's assume that Tatooine is close enough. It would still take a while to get there, which is what I mean when the show has a terrible sense of time. Still though, it doesn't top The Rise of Skywalker, which had the heroes do everything they did in 16 hours. Reva fully intends to kill Luke, but then sees herself and Luke as Anakin tried to kill her at one point. I would also like to point out that Reva is better written, and I guess I didn't get a whiff of stupid acting, which is a plus. And so Reva decides to bring back Luke unharmed. And so Obi-Wan sits down with her and congratulates her for showing mercy and compassion. And this entire scene would work if, again, the build-up wasn't so hollow. Reva in general was a crammed in character, and on top of that, they just end her story there, without a proper resolution on what happened to her. I know I'm gonna have people argue against me, but still, letting Reva live is incredibly risky. I don't care how much Obi-Wan wouldn't want to do it. It's either Reva dies or Obi-Wan risks exposure. Because unless Reva is going to help Obi-Wan protect Luke and stay on Tatooine, she needs to be removed as a risk. Either Obi-Wan should have killed her or Reva should have killed herself. And again, we don't even know what happens to her. Sort of like the scam artist and the melted ice cube. Also, Reva's arc was so pathetically weak. So they spend the next 30% of the episode wrapping shit up after the main conflict is over. And of course, it's all dragged out. We have Vader speak to the Emperor about Kenobi on Mustafar, and I have nothing to say here. It's just another fucking cameo from Ian McDiarmid, and he's been groped into this Disney Plus crap, and I'm just hoping no one else is. We see Leia on Alderaan finally embrace her princess title, along with the weaponless holster Obi-Wan gave her, which I didn't mention because it has little relevance to anything. Anyways, Obi-Wan comes back, has a final pep talk with Leia, and you know, the only way they could preserve continuity at this point is if they erased her memory of Obi-Wan. But they just make things worse by having Obi-Wan directly mention that if she needs help again, he'll help. Gee, I wonder how Leia didn't connect the dots. Fuck off, show. Then to break some more continuity, Obi-Wan goes back to Tatooine and talks to Owen, and Owen for some reason lets Obi-Wan directly interact with Luke. Guys, did you forget A New Hope where Owen has a visible disdain for Obi-Wan? So this entire subplot becomes pointless. Also because Luke isn't supposed to meet Obi-Wan or Ben or whatever until A New Hope. So yeah, the hello there wasn't worth it. Fuck off, show. And then we have Disney canon contradicting itself when we have Obi-Wan actually interact with the visible ghost of Qui-Gon Jinn. Wait, I thought the Clone Wars stated that Qui-Gon wasn't able to become fully visible because his Force Ghost training was incomplete, and so his voice could only be heard unless it was a place naturally strong with the Force, and well, Tatooine ain't it. This becomes especially absurd once you realize Filoni at this point is the continuity consultant on everything instead of George Lucas. So why didn't he tell the showrunners about the crap surrounding Qui-Gon Jinn not fully completing his Force Ghost training? This isn't George Lucas canon they broke, as it's their own continuity. So that's another instance of their own stupid canon being broken again. Divorced from the Clone Wars, the cameo is decent. That's the end of Obi-Wan Kenobi. What the fuck was that shit? I haven't even mentioned the stupidity of Obi-Wan letting Vader live if he at this point does truly believe that Anakin is forever gone. Screen Crush is going to have to come up with some insane mental gymnastics like they did for Spider-Man No Way Home to excuse this. When that scene actually happened, I was just thinking about how much better something like The Force Unleashed was, because Vader was almost killed, and canonically Starkiller chose to ignore Vader and save the rebellion he created. In that context, it worked. In Revenge of the Sith, it worked, but here, it doesn't. Fuck off, show. This was fucking terrible. It was a genocide of continuity, and damn was it harsh to promote the social justice. I forgot about Talalai immediately after they stopped mentioning her in episode 6, so that character was pointless. In fact, if they had actually focused on the two characters we wanted to see, like Obi-Wan and Darth Vader, instead of fucking Reva, the character they made up, this probably would have been 10 times better. Reva really dragged down the show to the depths of hell, and the moments where Reva was not on screen and had no bearing, the show could actually decently thrive. I hated this show. 3 out of 10 is the highest, most generous score I could give. Positives include the OG's acting, especially Ewan McGregor, and it's looking more like Star Wars than I expected it to. But the writing was the biggest fault. They should have cut out episode 4 entirely, and the show would have been better. I would have liked to see more Obi-Wan, Anakin, and Vader as the actual incentive for anyone to watch this show. This is another example of a Disney Plus failure. Seriously, are there any good shows made for Disney Plus that are on Disney Plus? Because it seems to just butcher everything. So I fully expect complaints from people telling me that I'm just a hater that was given what I wanted with the prequel OGs returning and I'm still complaining. And if you're going to say that, you have not been listening at all. This show was absolute dog shit. Redeemed by only a few things. Now with that being said, my Clone Wars Season 3 and Last Command review should come out after this as my big critiques. I pushed them to the side when I was making this video. So with that being said, that's my full review on Obi-Wan Kenobi. Here are my patrons on screen. I would appreciate if you subscribed because I'm really trying to get to 1,000 subscribers and my progress has been slow, so that I hope that by asking, I'll get there. Eventually. I'm JJ Plagiarisms, and until next time, what are stories but mystery boxes?